Welcome to this week's episode of the Well Anchored Life podcast, where we share the stories of brave guests who have navigated life's toughest storms and learned how to thrive amidst hardship. I am your host, Belisha Tang. This week, I am thrilled to have on the podcast mental health and wellness expert, Casey Hersch. Casey is a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, author, Latin ballroom dancer, and animal advocate. She has devoted her career to helping children, parents, families, and communities build resilience and minimize the effects of stress, trauma, and adverse childhood experiences throughout the lifespan. During her childhood, Casey witnessed the toll of trauma, poverty, and domestic violence on her health. She has spent most of her adult life overcoming Crohn's disease and mental illness, specifically anxiety, which further motivates her to create resources for children. Her work is published in a variety of venues, and recently she published her children's book, I Am Paso, A Cat Teaches Kids Ways to Turn Around Difficult Situations, and this book can be found on Amazon. Casey's diverse clinical experience as a psychotherapist, child custody investigator, educator, and community organizer inspired her to write I Am Paso. All too often, Casey sees toddlers, tweens, teenagers, and adults who missed out on early interventions. These mental health resources in schools, homes, and communities can reduce the long-term consequences of stress and trauma, such as chronic illness, mental illness, anger and behavior management issues, depression, and violence. Casey's evidence-based philosophy is simple. When we provide children the lessons and resources they need to build resilience, emotional intelligence, and healthy brain neural pathways, we give them the best opportunities to thrive. I Am Paso is Casey's gift to children, an intervention providing them the tools and confidence they need to live healthy and successful lives. Casey's love for Latin ballroom dance has transformed her life. Through dance, she experiences a positive relationship with her body while reducing the chronic stress of symptoms. She wishes for all people to find a passion that brings hope, joy, and peace to their lives. Everybody, please welcome Casey to the podcast. Hi, Casey. How are you?
Hello, thanks for having me.
Of course. Welcome. It's so great to reconnect with you. How are you doing today?
Doing great, doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, you were actually on my previous podcast, Athlete Voices. And we talked more in that podcast about your dance journey, because that was a podcast where I interviewed like dancers, gymnasts, figure skaters. And a big topic we discussed on that podcast was how dance was able to be a source of healing for you from Crohn's disease. And we're going to talk about, I really want to revisit that conversation in today's episode, how you found healing through dance and movement. Um, Before we get into that, let's talk about your upbringing, your childhood, and where you were born and raised.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in a very small rural community in Northern California, like population 300 people. The whole high school had about 1,500.
Oh,
So
wow.
my graduating class had like 35
Oh
students,
my God, that's very
my
small.
senior graduating class. So really economically poor. Lots of the economy was based on the timber industry and logging, which really was a dying industry
Mhm.
during my upbringing, and so it was really common for people to struggle financially, especially when you were involved in the timber industry, and that was a ever moving and dying industry in that community. So most people that live in that area, I feel like, were born and raised there. So my parents and their parents and whoever immigrated from wherever they immigrated in Europe many many years ago, actually during Prohibition, that was what my genealogy said. They actually all lived there, and that was the only place that many of them had been. And I feel like that's really common for the community. You're born and raised there and you stay there forever.
Mhm.
So I'm an only child, and poverty brings its own fair share of challenges. So often there's domestic violence, there's the financial and socioeconomic stresses, and with that can come domestic violence and abuse. So I did grow up in a home where there was domestic violence, there was alcoholism, and all the things that we often call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. I didn't have parents who were involved in prison, but my parents did have a divorce, so I did go through, really tumultuous divorce. And then you've got the substance abuse piece. I had a really stable mom, and my mom wasn't involved in alcohol at all, and she was just this like stay-at-home mom, definitely a rock, but she was a victim herself of the violence. And she was, I think, the grounding force for me, because unlike a lot of situations where there are a lot of ACEs and adverse childhood experiences, a lot of times you don't have a consistent, stable caregiver. I
Mm-hmm.
did have a mom who was always there. She was reading, she was singing, she was talking to me. So those things that they say that you really need the first 3 years of life, that help sort of buffer brain development, and those nice, strong neural pathways that really do lay the foundation for the rest of your life. There's something really true about first five when they say reading, singing, and talking is important. I did have a lot of that. And
Mm-hmm.
those are things you can do when you're poor.
Yeah.
And so my mom was always there, which, there's good things and bad things about that, because I am an only child, maybe a little bit too much, oversight at times. But definitely that was one of the things that contributed to the resilience for me amid all of the terrible stressors. So
Yeah.
I just really wanted to get out. I knew that at a young age I was really focused on school, because for me, having nobody in my family ever go to college and being a first generation college student, which I ended up being, college was like the ticket out of that community and a ticket for me to have a different life, unlike my parents.
Yeah.
So and I think my mom, she knew that, so she really was quite diligent about making sure that I got my homework done, and we did lots of school projects together. She was really involved, because I think for her too, she knew that if I can help Casey do well in school, then there's a chance that I might get out. And that's what I focused on. And I think the more you can be surrounded by academics, community service things, your teachers, those are the assets that help build resilience and can offset all the traumas and poverty and socioeconomic challenges, domestic violence. I mean, if you have a little bit of those other assets,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't take away the trauma, but it does help, I think, build the resilience that helps you sort of work your way out of it, or find a path, at least, that is toward health and wellness, that, gets you out of that
Yeah.
a bit more. So college was my focus. I did really well in school, and I did play the piano, which
Nice.
was really important. My mom cleaned houses so she could afford to pay for, at the time, my $6 a lesson piano lessons.
Wow.
Because it
Wow.
was not, that seems like nothing now, but back then it was a lot.
Yeah.
And music was always a part of my life, and that was really important, I think, for my brain and my stress level
Mm-hmm.
and coping. And so yeah, that was my early years for sure.
Yeah. Wow. I remember you mentioned it in the previous podcast about your upbringing and the ACEs, right? Adverse childhood experiences. And I forgot to mention when introducing you that you are a therapist yourself. You're a licensed clinical social worker. Would you say that your experiences in early life with all this, poverty, trauma, ACEs kind of inspired you to go into the mental health field? Would you say that
Yeah, I
is the
mean,
case?
so in that small rural community where medical care was deeply lacking,
Hmm.
there was a psychologist, and my mom, was really proactive in my health, because I was very unwell. I had lots of medical problems. And so she was pretty savvy in terms of saying, I want to get Casey into therapy. And
Mm,
so it was very unconventional, because we'll talk about mental health stigma, but definitely in that community, you were really super crazy if you mentioned going to see a therapist. But my mom sort of broke all the rules and went against my father's, very like dominant personality, and she got me into therapy. So by the time I was in probably fifth, sixth grade, I had a psychologist, and that was really huge. So being exposed to being in therapy as a kid, I saw how crucial it was to have a safe place that I could go, that my parents weren't involved, and
Hmm.
where there was a person there that was just there for me and really all about me,
Yeah.
and was not, and was objective. I mean, really objective, and looking at like what it is that I need, instead of, maybe driven by what my parents, how they wanted to influence me, or even some of the secrets that, often are hidden in these glass houses when there is a lot of trauma. So I did have that outlet. And so definitely that showed me how important therapy is.
Mm.
But I think in terms of my career path, when you grow up in a home where there is a lot of violence and there's a lot of stress, I think children, especially when it happens right at the beginning of their life, they develop a certain type of empathy and insight that is, I think, can only be really learned in these certain like lived experiences. So I do feel that good therapists, sad to say, are really the ones that developed this deep sort of insight, a little bit of intuition, a little bit of survival that comes from having a home that is really broken. I
Yeah.
just don't know how you build that empathy and that awareness through just observing versus living. And
Absolutely.
so I think it makes you a much stronger therapist, and you're naturally wired to sort of pick up on other people that are struggling.
Yeah.
You just have a whole different radar when you're looking at the world.
Yeah.
So I do think that that definitely was a part of me, and eventually did drive me toward the profession, because it was a natural part of my personality, really, to help
Hmm.
people, and also want to help people who, to help them not go through what I went through,
Hmm.
was a really big force for me. Like, how is it that I can maybe be a light for someone else, or provide a little bit of hope, and through my story or through my experiences, that gives them just maybe something I didn't have, or a little bit of what I did have,
Yeah.
and can, just change things in a positive way, because
Yeah.
we all are part of, making changes the best we can.
Definitely. Remarkable. Everything you said is very inspirational. That I think one of the most fulfilling things you can do for your own healing is once you've come full circle in your healing, the next step is to give back to the people who have faced similar challenges and struggles that you have, and help them using your own lived experience. And that's actually why I recently got the peer support specialization certification. So I'm certified through NAMI, and that's exactly why, I've also gone through my own version of trauma and ACEs. And um, so I want to talk about this idea of like trauma, and how two people can go through the same traumatic experience but respond in very different ways,
Yeah,
right? That's a thing, right? So
for sure.
why does that happen?
Yeah. I think that, we have to be careful, because we have all these words that describe these situations. And so trauma is very real, but I think like in the last decade, these words also can become sort of minimized or watered down a bit, or
Mhm.
overused, and you kind of lose a little bit of the weight of what they really mean.
Yeah.
And I've seen that like in my career, similar to like empowerment. These words are really important, but we have to remember that they're contextual, and everybody's experience is very, very unique. So someone as a child might lose a pet, and for some people who are not strong animal lovers, for example, you hear people sometimes they lose an animal, a very beloved pet that is like a child or a part of their family, and you see someone else who maybe doesn't have that same experience, and they'll say, "Well, it's just an animal. It's just a pet. Why would that be so traumatic?" So, I think the reason I'm bringing that up is that in any situation has the potential to be traumatic to the person's perception and how they're receiving it. So for me, the loss of a pet is a huge trauma. And that is the way that I perceive it, the way that it affects my body, my physiology, the way that I see the world. Someone else may lose a pet and they will not have that similar experience.
Hmm.
Now, someone also may have intensive, terrible abuse and be a victim of that and not develop an autoimmune disease. Now, in my case, I had all of that and I also developed an autoimmune disease, but certainly not everybody who grew up in a similar situation that I did, or at least had those markers of violence and abuse and ACEs. It doesn't mean that they are necessarily going to develop an
Yeah.
autoimmune disease. They may not have any medical condition. They may just have other struggles. So I think it's such a personal, we come into this world with our own little makeup and our own exposure in an environment. We all have certain things that we bring just by virtue of being born, and then we have certain things in our environment that are also influencing us, and then we have our genetics and the epigenetics and all the generational stuff. I feel like that's all very unique to each person. And
Yeah.
the moral of the story, in my opinion, is that when it's a trauma for someone, it needs to be acknowledged as a trauma. And we all need to have compassion and empathy and to realize that what is that for one person may not be that for another. A person
Absolutely.
may go through a terrible fire and lose everything they own. I have several, friends and family who went through both the Camp Fire and the Dixie Fire. It's very different how they all responded. Some people are still very much so in a state of shock and are struggling to even put small pieces of their lives back together. Other people have been able to handle it in a different way, but it's all very real and I think needs to be acknowledged as such. And we shouldn't put a timeline or a label on what is or isn't trauma for people. And I do
Yeah.
think it really does come down to that socio-emotional uniqueness, the environment, and what we really bring into the world, and what we have that we cultivate around us that we have control over. Like
Hmm.
the more support systems, you can have terrible trauma and respond to it with a lot of stress and illness and disease and mental health challenges. But you can also, those same people can create a support system and a buffer around them at any point in their life to offset that and
Yeah.
have what's called post traumatic growth. So it's not fixed in any time, it's always changing. And we are always changing in these systems that we live in that are
Hmm.
so fluid and so evolving, and moment by moment they're changing and we're influencing and being influenced by them.
Yeah.
So it's not a clear answer, but I think the moral of the story is that we have to remember that it's not the same for each person, and we need to respect, appreciate, and honor that and meet that person where they are at, whatever that trauma is for them.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. Everyone is different, right? And then I also talked about on a previous episode with a guy who he was the father of a son with bipolar disorder, and he also worked as a family support specialist. So he's also in the mental health field, and he identified as a highly sensitive person, and that is a actual category
Yes.
label, right? So I'm also a highly sensitive person. So
Yeah.
my trauma of being in an abusive sport for 10 years really traumatized me, and may have even given rise to this bipolar disorder that manifested that may not have otherwise manifested had I not been through the trauma. And
Yeah.
I don't say that with any resentment or whatever. It's just, it is what it is.
Yes.
But I have teammates who had it worse than me.
Mm-hmm.
They were not only like verbally, emotionally abused, they were physically abused too.
Yeah.
And they don't have bipolar, you know.
Yeah. And I think there's a temperament, where that when children are born into the world, they all come with a bit of a temperament or a predisposition. And those temperaments and predispositions get sort of formed and influenced, and that affects it too. From the moment that I came into the world, I was a highly sensitive child.
Mm,
I was very susceptible to getting sick. I mean, my mom was constantly dealing with me getting some sort of sore throat or infection. So I already had this predisposition. Now, who knows if I hadn't experienced the trauma, maybe that wouldn't have manifested into Crohn's disease or an autoimmune? We'll never know, but I do think that we can lay a foundation for disease and illness with the certain environmental and social factors that we're exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And we can also sort of create buffers that minimize that if there is a predisposition.
Yeah.
But I think we get really caught up too much in sort of labeling, or judging what, someone may come from a very wealthy family, for example, and to the outside, for someone who grew up in poverty, they may see that wealthy family and think, well, they've got no stress. They've got all the money in the world.
Yeah.
That does not mean that there's not trauma.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean that the person, any of the people in that environment, won't perceive or receive a situation that happens to them or that they witness that doesn't happen to them at all, but they experience because they see it. That just depends on their wiring and how they react to it and how they internalize that.
Yeah.
And that's not a defect in anybody. That's just reality of being a human being.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing topic. Now I want to talk about the link between trauma and autoimmune disease. So, I'm reading this book, a couple books actually, talking about gut microbiome and inflammation and how that's related to brain health. And you got like psychiatric conditions, as well as medical conditions, and they're saying like the common pathway is the gut and the microbiome, metabolic health, and if there's a lot of inflammation in the body, in the gut, then it can give rise to mental disorders as well. So it's like the gut-brain axis, right? The vagus nerve, all these things. So what is the mechanism of the link between trauma and Crohn's disease?
Yeah, so I think my favorite researcher is from UCLA. His name is Dr. Emran Meyer,
Hmm.
and he wrote the book called The Gut Mind Connection and then The Gut Immune Connection. And I've had several opportunities to interview him and spend time and ask him questions. I feel like he was the one that brought this connection between, autoimmune or gut conditions and the connection to mental health to the public, to the general public. So the way that I would describe it is that we have these like bugs that live in our gut, and we've got, all these different systems inside of our body, and those systems are living, breathing with organisms, and those organisms are affected by stress in the womb, out of the womb. If a mother is highly stressed and they have a lot of cortisol pumping through their body, then the baby is having a diet of those stress hormones, which is altering the baby's chemistry. And that's just why it's so important for pregnant moms to get really good care and to have access to care, because it starts from the moment that baby is conceived.
Hmm.
So I think trauma can affect our nervous system and our stress response to such a degree that they've even shown in studies that the organisms in the gut can become more violent in response to trauma in the home. So E. coli, something that's very normal in our bowel, can become more aggressive in a stressful environment that the person is living in. So I think that for me, that really drove it home in that where we're living, the environment we're living, the kinds of stress that we're experiencing does affect our immune system, because our immune system wants to protect us. But when our immune system is faced with so much, it also has the potential to turn on us and attack us, because when we are under stress, sometimes it's hard for the body to recognize that we are not the foreign invader, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
we can become sort of the aggressive part of ourselves that our immune system wants to attack to protect us
Hmm.
from. And that's where it gets really, like, I think more spiritual. And because in autoimmune, your immune system that's designed to protect you actually is attacking you because it thinks that you're not safe. But where do you get that? Where does your body get confused? Your body
Yeah.
gets confused because of stress and all the hormones and all the responses that the body is having in the nervous system. So I think that's really an important piece to be aware of if you're
Hmm.
dealing with autoimmune. I don't think you can separate the stress and trauma or environmental circumstances from the disease itself, because they are very interconnected.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so Emran Meyer really described it quite well, where he talked about the mind gut connection, and that our gut is affecting our mind, but our mind is also affecting our gut. It's not one direction,
Right.
it
It's
goes both. So,
bi-directional, yeah.
how we're thinking and how we feel in our head and our thoughts can drive how those organisms in our bowel and gut are responding. But also those organisms, if they are more aggressive or there's imbalances with them, those organisms can definitely contribute to mental health and make people feel depressed or have other mental health symptoms. So that's why this importance of balancing our lives with our health, physical, emotional, and spiritual, is so important, because we're not separate entities. We're all connected, and there is a mini brain in
Hmm.
our gut
Yeah.
that's similar to the brain in our head.
Fascinating. Fascinating. And these two books I read that talk about this, one is called Brain Maker, and the other one is Brain Energy. And they were written by, one was a psychiatrist, one was a neurologist, and they were, yeah, exploring the gut-brain link, and a very radical thesis, but they were saying that if you can do dietary intervention and really be on a good diet, whether that's like a keto diet, there's a link between like keto and treating, like, for example, schizophrenia even. You know, the Chris Palmer, the psychiatrist who wrote Brain Energy, said he was able to treat a guy with treatment resistant schizophrenia. None of the psychiatric meds were working on him, but then he puts him on the keto diet and suddenly his symptoms are all but gone. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, how did that happen? You know, and that's what sparked his investigation. So we can all change our diet, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's, if obviously if we have good resources to healthy organic foods and all
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, diet's huge.
diet's
But it's
huge.
very, I think, really important to remember that it's very specific to the person. So Dr. Meyer is, like I said, brilliant, and this is his area of expertise. And he also works at the Oppenheimer Stress and Resilience Center at UCLA. So lots of work on the body's stress response and how it connects with the gut and the mind. His primary diet that he recommends is a Mediterranean diet.
Mm, mm-hmm,
So that I always take these diets with a little bit of a grain of salt,
hmm.
because you have to kind of remember the way that your body is. So, for example, I grew up where my a lot of hunting in my family. I'm not a big fan of it now, but that was the way that I was raised. And so we had a lot of deer meat, pheasant meat. So I grew up much like a carnivore. Like, I grew up on a lot of meat. And so to take my body and to say, okay, we're going to like drop all that and we're going to do lots of beans, lots of berries, and lots of fish, it might not be the way that my body composition and my genetics and the way that my body is used to existing can adapt. So
Hmm.
I think we have to just remember that there is no one size fits all, and what kind of diet might work for somebody isn't necessarily going to work for everybody.
Yeah.
And I still eat, with Crohn's disease, I still eat whole grains like brown rice. I don't do any gluten, but I'm someone that does eat a lot of brown rice and a lot of organic white rice. For some people with Crohn's disease or any other type of autoimmune, they may have to have a grain-free, completely grain-free diet. In my case, I'm one of those people that if I didn't have these grains, I would be like, have no weight on me, and I would be very sick. I do need to have these carbohydrates, and I also do need to have meat.
Hmm.
So I think, people just have to experiment and try and be very mindful about what they're trying and listen to their body, and not necessarily follow a book unless they follow it and they feel like it's actually congruent with what they need.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And that goes for like just all of the sort of popular diets. There's so many of them out there, but that's different than just daily healthy living and eating. I mean, we do need to be mindful of not having artificial, sweeteners and synthetic things going into our body, like being able to name and understand what we're eating and knowing the ingredients in what we're eating and having more whole foods
Hmm.
is, and rather than packaged and all the extra fillers they put in. I think that that's just a really important baseline if people can afford to not eat those, packaged foods and to go
Exactly.
more whole food for everybody. I think that's generally going to be healthier for lifetime
Yeah,
longevity.
definitely. Um, so now let's talk about your diagnosis of Crohn's disease. When were you diagnosed and what were some of the symptoms that led to your diagnosis?
Yeah, so in the 80s they used antibiotics, which is also another really important thing to be mindful of, that in the 80s antibiotics were used not only to treat something but to also diagnose. So
Hmm.
every time I had a health problem as a child I was given hardcore antibiotics, and we do know that antibiotics dramatically change the microbiome, and if you kill off enough of the good organisms, it's very, very difficult after many, many years to bring your microbiome back to the healthier state that it would have been had that not happened.
Yeah.
So that's just another like social, emotional stressor that I definitely had, growing up. So lots of illness, lots of antibiotics, and then in college, just started to have more abdominal pain. But abdominal pain is like one of those, they call them like complex and mysterious symptoms because there's so many conditions that can lead to abdominal pain. And at that time in the early 2000s, the doctors didn't really, this idea of any integration, which is still lacking in the medical community, but it was really lacking then. Like every part of you was separate. You had ovaries, you had a bladder, you had a bowel, but doctors didn't see them as like the whole body all being connected. So I had a lot of specialists who didn't know why I was having pain. I was having lots of bleeding. They had no idea what was going on with me, and so they hooked my diagnosis on what is the most like female oriented condition, which was endometriosis. And they did an exploratory, it's a laparoscopy where they explore and they go in through the belly button to see if there really truly is this thing called endometriosis. And during that exploratory, very simple outpatient procedure, they hit my iliac vein in three places, which is the part of the body that provides blood flow to all the lower extremities. So I had in my 20s massive, massive trauma to my whole body because they had to, open me and suture my veins, and I lost feeling of my legs. And so the point I'm making is my experience with the medical system has been quite tumultuous and also institutionally traumatizing.
Yeah.
And at that point in my 20s, everybody kind of lost track of what was going on with the pain I was having because I had this whole other issue now that had to be tended to. So it wasn't until a decade later in my 30s where finally a doctor said, maybe it really is your gut, Casey. Maybe we should do some testing. And they did the proper tests and found out this whole time I actually had Crohn's disease, which is a disease of the small intestine. That it is an inflammatory bowel disease, it is an autoimmune, but it specifically attacks areas of the small intestine and affects nutrition absorption, causes lots of scarring, blockages, and strictures, and it's just a very miserable thing. But that didn't happen until my early 30s, and then I had the label for all purposes slightly beneficial because at least we knew which part of the body to focus on.
Hmm.
The label itself, not helpful because whether it's called Crohn's or not doesn't really matter. Everybody's so different with that. But the fact that it was focused in the gut was pretty helpful in terms of how to get treatment because at least what part of the body is the source of the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how the diagnosis came, through a lot of trauma and errors in the
Wow.
medical system.
I'm so sorry you had such a tumultuous experience with the medical system. It really is like systemic and institutional
Yeah.
problems. And But you got the diagnosis, and now with a diagnosis, there's a treatment plan, right? So now you have a
Yeah,
blueprint, but every case is different, right? What may
yeah,
work for some one person may not work for you. So how did you come up with your own personalized treatment plan?
yeah. So remember, I had all that experience with antibiotics, and then
Hmm.
I had the injuries. So I had started to develop a pretty strong distrust and not good relationship with conventional medicine already. I also didn't have a good relationship with drugs and antibiotics, pain medications, whatever it was, because those, in my case, were either harmful to me or they sort of put a band aid on things and then they developed. I had other problems as a result of whatever it is that they would want me to take
Mm.
because the other organs still have to process, pain medication. The liver has to deal with all that. So I really kind of knew at that point in my 30s that I was dealing with something that was a bit out of league for conventional medicine, and I still think it's true. I still feel like autoimmune requires a treatment plan that is not just going and seeing the specialist or the conventional doctor. I think you really do have to look at it very holistically
Hmm.
and go at it from so many different angles, including lifestyle. So first was diet for me, of course, and then I had a lot of influence just serendipitously, people coming into my life that were already into supplementation and herbal remedies and energy medicine and lots of different types of healing
Hmm.
that at the time seemed a bit crazy to me,
Hmm.
but nothing seemed crazier than what I'd been through. So it was like, okay, I need to be open minded.
Yeah.
Native Americans use shamanism for healing. I mean, lots of cultures do lots of things with energy and plants and herbs that is very natural to them. And somehow in the United States, we've gotten a little detached from that, but then
Hmm.
there are people that are always trying to bring it back. So I was pretty fortunate to have an open mind, to have an educated mind at that point that allowed me to open the door to other ways of looking at Crohn's disease and to realize it was diet, it was my lifestyle, it was what I took to nourish my body in terms of supplementation. And I developed a very strong passion for integration and how I could, as a whole being, live with the condition versus just going to the doctor and taking immunosuppressant drugs.
Yeah.
Because for me, and I'm not saying that doesn't work for other people, for me, that would have absolutely done me in. I was not a candidate for the life of, infusions and drug medication. That's not something that my sensitive body resonated with at all.
Hmm.
So I had to look outside the box, and it's just an ongoing, everyday process of learning and being open to trying new things and having patience. And that is largely the reason why I'm here still today, is because I did more of the holistic integrative stuff versus just the one option.
Right.
Take the medication, take the pain medication, go home and live with it.
Right. Because a lot of these medication, they don't fix the root cause,
No,
right? They're just
absolutely not.
band-aids, addressing
They do not fix
symptoms,
the
not
root
root
cause.
cause.
No,
So,
there's much more, especially in a lot of autoimmune conditions, especially Crohn's. The medication, there are times where the inflammation can get so great that those drugs can come in and they can decrease the inflammation enough that it can prevent having damage to the organs. There is a time and place for them, but those are those time and places. The day to day, 365 days out of the year, those medications for a lot of people are not, they're not getting beneath the real cause of the problem or helping the body really at least get away from the disease a little bit or get a little bit better instead of a little bit worse. I feel
hmm.
like you're kind of stuck where you are, and certainly quality of life's important, day to day is important, but I've really embraced more like not the way I am in the moment, but the way that I can be long term. Like
Mm.
for me, like not focusing on symptom management today, that's not the most important thing to me. It's like, how can I improve the quality of my life long term so I can hold on to the other organs in my body longer term? And so that's just a different way that I have, had to look at the condition.
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever wonder like, oh, why me? Like this sucks. This sucks living with this. Like I'm resentful.
Yeah. Um, yes, I would be lying if I didn't say
Hmm.
that's true, but I also have a lot of gratitude that it could be a lot worse.
Mm.
So I guess I hold sort of, I guess a little bit of anger I've held mostly in my life for like what happened to me when I was young.
Yeah,
Like I do feel like those are things that I had zero responsibility for. I was
right.
just a victim of the circumstances. And so that trauma stuff, it's like, it makes me that much more passionate to say, like, we really need to address these early intervention resources for kids. Because if you don't have them, then the chances of all these traumatic situations can just sort of fester in the body and create a much harder life for that young person as they are growing into an adult.
Yeah,
And some of that is truly preventable.
yeah,
So I have a little bit of resentment for that, and also maybe for the system that we live in, this system, government, medical, that is often not very conducive to supporting like early intervention and prevention resources.
yeah.
And that part I think is the bigger resentment for me, is that
Mm-hmm.
there are ways to mitigate this, to make it a little bit easier and to not make it so hard on people. And there are other options. I mean, most people can't afford to, if they have health insurance that covers a certain copay for a medication, they have to pay out of pocket if they want to do anything that's integrative and holistic. Most
Right.
people honestly can't afford that.
I
And
know.
so they're limited with what they can do for their health just because the system doesn't embrace these other modalities for healing. And that part
Exactly.
I think I resent the most.
How can we just from a big picture standpoint, how can we shift that? What can we do, to drive the culture of medicine, kind of shifting the whole paradigm of it,
Yeah.
right? From like symptom management, just pill popping medications, all this shit with insurance, and um, you know, how can we change it into a more integrative, holistic way of seeing the body and the self? Like what can we do?
Well, I think it really starts with getting rid of the power dichotomy that comes from patient and physician. I still think we really have a culture where patients are in this role where they feel like the physician is the expert. They're the ones that have had all the training, all the education, and they're inherently sort of in a power position.
Hmm.
So it's hard for patients to self-advocate because we have been taught for generations after generations that you go to the doctor tells you what to do, and that's what you need to do. You need to
Right,
follow that.
right.
So I do think it starts like more at a micro level in sort of empowering people to have a voice about their own bodies and to realize that you live in your own body every day. So there is no doctor on the planet that is a better expert in my body than me because I live with me.
Yeah,
Now, that doesn't mean that they don't know more about something that they've researched or they don't have day to day patient experience that I don't have. But no one really knows what it's like to be inside my body better than me. So I am an expert already, and what I have to say about myself is it does count. And I think that's such an important like social work principle, is that we really try, especially in social work as a therapist, we really try to really foster client self-determination, which
yeah,
means
that's
that they are the ones that are the experts in their own lives. They are the ones that have the tools to make the change. We're the ones that are just there to guide it, facilitate it, and support it. But we really need to empower their voice to do what they need to do for themselves. And I think that it's crucial. And I think kids can be taught to, say no, to stand up for themselves in situations where I'm going to digress. I wrote this children's book.
yes.
that
I
I wrote
yeah,
that's all about, it's called I Am
I
Paso,
am
that
pasta.
teaches kids ways to turn around difficult situations. And so I was going into a second grade classroom, and I was, reading the book to the kids, and I have all these activities that we do around all these challenges that Paso the cat faces in terms of stress and confidence and bullying. And so there's a situation in the book where Paso goes to see Dr. Bangle, and Dr. Bangle calls Paso Possum. He doesn't hear his name right, and he calls him Possum instead of Paso. And Paso gets very upset because he's like, "My name is Paso. You just called me Possum. Not
Mm.
only am I a cat, but you called me the wrong creature." He's
Mm-hmm.
all upset. And so this is happening, and I'm reading this to the kids. And what Paso ends up doing is he tells Dr. Bangle, "Excuse me, doctor, but you called me the wrong name. I'm a cat." And he corrects the doctor. And the kids, I'm reading the story to the kids, and there are several kids that gasp, literally these little second graders, and they say, uh, "Excuse me, Miss Casey, um, Paso shouldn't do that." And I said, "What
Oh.
should Paso not do?" And this one little boy, along with another little girl, they both said, "Paso shouldn't talk back to the doctor like that."
Oh,
And that
wow.
was really like a poignant moment for me where, like, even for these young kiddos, they've been somehow in the culture led to believe that you don't speak up for yourself with an authority figure or a physician in a position of power. And it's not like all kids believe that, but it was very, very, very significant because it opened up an entire discussion with
Yeah.
the entire second grade class that had a lot of little kids.
Wow.
And unanimously, they all thought that Paso did the wrong thing, and Paso did the right thing.
He
So
did the right
those are
thing.
moments. Paso should stand up for himself and say, "Hey,
Absolutely.
I'm not a possum. My name's Paso." He should.
Yeah.
That's a really appropriate way. And so then we kind of expanded it, and we had this little scenario. We said to the kids, "Well, what if you were at the cafeteria and you ordered, cheese pizza, but you get pepperoni pizza instead?
Hmm.
What do you do?" And it was amazing how creative these kids were to not tell the cafeteria person that they got the wrong pizza. I mean, of course, taking the pepperoni off, throwing it away, all these different things, they just didn't, it didn't occur to them that it would be okay to say, "I got the wrong pizza. Can you give me the right one?"
Right.
So I think that the moral of the story with this is that people, we can really make a difference by starting at these little tiny levels and teaching kids and young adults and adults that they do have a voice. They can stand up for themselves. They do know their body. They do have wisdom about their body. And the more that we do that, I think slowly it shifts that power position and puts a patient or just a human being back in a position of ownership of themselves.
Yeah.
And then that opens the door to more integration and holistic approaches because you are seeing the person as part of their own system and
Yeah.
not just, another thing that's there to be told what to do and they're supposed to just go do it.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah. And right now, what you're doing, being on this podcast talking about it, like this is contribution as well. And I
Yes.
want to really pinpoint that is like take agency over your own healing,
Yeah.
right? You know yourself the best. You live in your body. Okay.
Yes.
And this self-determination. I love that word. I've heard of it used in therapy. So one of my questions was, what is exactly the role of a therapist? You know, they don't give direct advice, right? Tell you like
They
what to do.
shouldn't. Yes, they
Okay.
shouldn't. Yeah, they shouldn't. Well, a good therapist, in my opinion, and we talked earlier off video about the concept of rapport,
Hmm.
and a good therapist, I feel, is really in a relationship role where their job is to meet the patient where they are at, not in any spot that isn't where they are, and to honor the moment by moment interactions with them, whatever it is that they are. Sometimes clients come and they're angry and they hate therapy and they hate the therapist. It's not my job to change that. It's my job to sit in that space with what it is that they're bringing to me and to be okay with that and not try to judge it, shape it, change it in that moment. That's how you are creating an honest relationship with somebody. A relationship that's truly authentic and that is accepting and honoring the person in front of you for all that they're bringing, all the dysfunction and all the function.
Hmm.
So I really feel a therapist's role, yes, we have all this training and we have all kinds of like tips and tricks, and we can give you exercises and we can do role plays and we can direct you to books and all of that. But the relationship you form with the therapist, I feel is the most healing above and beyond that, because if you can create a relationship with someone where you can be who you really are and divulge all the things inside of you that maybe make you uncomfortable, and to feel like this is me, all the good, the bad, and the glorious and the not so good. That's a real relationship, and I do feel like relationships transform people,
Yeah.
and that is the essence of therapy. And I feel like all too often therapists have a set of techniques that they have used for a long time, and at the time that they learned them and trained in them, they were really popular, they were really good at them. A good therapist is going to realize that when they get stuck, and to realize that not all the techniques that they've invested their entire life and career in will help every single person they see, and they need to be incredibly adaptable,
Yeah.
and they need to be humble, and to realize a lot of times I have no answer at all. It's about me and the client sitting there, and we're brainstorming, and we're sort of in that muck together, but we're together and we're figuring out like, hey, what do you think would work? You want to try this? Like, you're going
Hmm.
through this together
Together.
very collaboratively. and
Yeah.
and to me that's like the root bare bones minimum of a really good therapist and a really good therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
And that they are adaptable to that, and they let go of all their preconceived ideas about, well, this EMDR is evidence based and it works for such and such and such, and these are the studies. EMDR is great for some, not for all.
Yep.
And that you can let go of that and sit with the person in front of you and empower them to contribute to their own healing. Because when they
Yep.
realize that they know a lot more than they think they do, and they're given the resources and the confidence to do that, and through a good relationship, that is really sets the foundation for all the other techniques to come in,
Yeah.
and all the other, sort of brainy stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love everything you said about so this book, The Gift of Therapy, have you read it?
No.
By Dr. Yalom. He's a psychiatrist who also practiced
Yeah.
psychotherapy. And he it's a series of like 85 essays he's written about therapy and the whole practice of it. And one of the essays was called The Here and Now. So like being really present in the here and now, in the moment with the client, with your by the way, do you call them clients or patients or no?
That is like
Right.
in the terms of like political correctness and
Yeah.
how we've changed our semantics. For a long time, you didn't want to call them patients because that implied sort of the sick role. Then it changed to client. Then it changed to consumer.
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 Oh,
That was that for a while. So I'm still like old school, and I prefer more client because
hmm.
I don't like the sick identification of
Right.
patient.
Right.
Um, and then sometimes I just say they're like my dear people, because I
Yeah.
just, like, to me, I just don't know how you use those words without creating some sort of like power differential, and I just
Exactly.
don't want to see that. So to me, clients a little more neutral.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
coming to me for a service.
Exactly.
But it will change, and I'm sure it's changing as we speak, with like what a consumer was the latest I was
Really.
that was coming down the pike. That just feels a little awkward to
You're a
me. I don't know.
consumer of
Yeah.
therapy
Therapy
services.
services. Yeah, I think that's, but yeah, so
Okay. Yeah.
um
Good to clarify that. Yeah, because I've heard different terms.
yeah.
But
It's
yeah, just
also really
yeah.
important for the therapist to, I think, just back to that, to do their own work.
Hmm.
So when a therapist is sitting with someone, I think that therapists need to be really aware, self-aware of their own triggers, what's going on inside of them, their own biases. We have them. All of us have them. But
Yeah.
this level of awareness that comes from also going to therapy yourself as a
Yes.
therapist
Yes.
is really, really important because sometimes we get in the way of helping patients, clients, consumers. We
Hmm.
get in the way of helping them because we are not aware of our own issues or how some of our own judgments and triggers are like kind of fueling the situation. So it's really important for therapists. And I tell people always, I think you should interview a lot of therapists and I think you should pick the one that you like. If you walk into a room and you just like that person feels bad,
Mm-hmm.
like you have a gut feeling like I don't know, they just rub me the wrong way. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
the way this feels. Then you should, like, I honor that. I'm like, I'm not offended.
Yeah.
Rock on, go find someone else. I support you 1,000% because you should like the therapist that you're
Yeah.
seeing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Um, Totally. The client therapist relationship is one of the most important relationships. Like in my life, personally, I've been seeing the same therapist for 11 years,
Hmm.
Zoe, since I was 16. And I really like her, and I trust her. And she's known me before and after my bipolar diagnosis. So that was really helpful, when I was grappling with an identity crisis post-diagnosis. She was the person who reminded me, no, you are still the same
Yeah,
person. You're not, like you have this thing, you have a label and a diagnosis, but you're still you. You're still
right.
Belisha. So that was helpful. But yeah, and just everything you said about continuous education, right? Being adaptable as a therapist, because medicine is always changing, paradigms always shifting. There's always new theories and techniques coming out. So if you're so caught up in your old ways, that renders you not able to treat a wide array of clients, right?
Or you miss seeing what the person is really bringing to you because
Mhm.
you're so sure, because you are limited by these techniques that have worked for the majority of your people. You sometimes then can push it, pressure it, insist on it a little
Mhm.
more, that and it's not helpful
Right.
to the client. That's why integration is so important, and I think therapists should embrace this idea of integrative approaches more, which is what I'm most passionate about.
Hmm.
You don't have to be the expert in everything. You
Mm.
just have to have enough diversity and awareness that you can recognize when what you're doing is not working. You're willing to make a referral. You're willing to brainstorm other ideas and say, like, what about this? I don't know about this, but let's just look at it. You have to be open-minded and adaptable in that way if you really want to be effective.
Yeah.
And you have to know that when you're limited and when your approach is not a good fit for the person you're working with. And I find that's really a challenge in my profession, that people want to do the same thing over and over again
Mm.
and keep doing what they're comfortable in. And none of this work should be comfortable. Therapists
Hmm.
should not be comfortable. It's not comfortable dealing with the human condition. It's not comfortable being human.
Hmm.
So they should be able to be uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
it's not, there's no difference between me as a human sitting there as a therapist versus the person sitting with me asking me for help. I'm a human just like them. I'm not, I just had a little bit different training, but I'm still a human trying to get through every day, and I'm still dealing with my own struggles. And I think that should be more level because we are all human.
Yeah.
And then you've got, I think, a better opportunity to build an honest rapport with someone of trust, because the more trust you have, the more you can be therapeutic.
Absolutely. And speaking about trust, like how relevant do you think self-disclosure as a therapist is for building trust? Like if you yourself have struggled with mental health or anything, like and telling your client that, do you think that makes therapy better or do you think that makes it worse?
Yeah, I think like in therapy, we talk a lot about boundaries,
Hmm.
and it's really, really important that we keep some separation of our personal life from the professional life. Because, like with Facebook, for example, I think if you're treating folks, I think you need to be aware of how these things that can be posted and shown, are perceived.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a really important separation of your private and personal life. But I do think when it comes to being a human in the room and normalizing and building trust, if you self-disclose something, you need to self-disclose it not because it somehow benefits you by telling your story. When it becomes about the therapist telling their story, then
Right.
bad, bad, bad.
Bad.
But
Yeah.
if the therapist is mindful and says, wow, I've been through this, I think it might help to tell this person that I have Crohn's disease, or to tell them that, I know what it's like to go through a really hard relationship breakup, or
Mm-hmm.
that, I'm not perfect. I've had lots of like teenagers like, oh, Casey, you're perfect. You don't understand. You don't have anxiety. You're a therapist. I mean, that is a really important moment to do self-disclosure and say, absolutely not true. I
Mm-hmm.
have anxiety all the time, and to like make yourself real.
Yeah.
I think when it's not good is when you just have folks who haven't done the work, or they don't have the boundaries, and they make a therapy session all about them as the therapist, and that's
Oh
really
yeah.
unhealthy.
I was shopping around for therapists when I was in LA, and I had a therapist spend the whole hour just talking about his life story and why he got into therapy. I mean, great, you can tell me that in like two
Yeah,
minutes, right? Not
no.
a whole
But
hour.
there are a lot of not good. I mean, like in any profession, there's
Hmm.
really good, there's okay, and there's really bad.
Hmm.
And that's just the truth. And um,
You
it's,
sound like an amazing therapist, by the way.
thank you.
And I think, yeah, yeah,
I
no, totally.
try. I really try. And I would want someone a bit like me to be my therapist, and that I would want them to think about these things that I think about
Yeah,
when they're working with me.
yeah,
Because to me, that's really ethical, is to think about these things a bit and to be a little bit aware of oneself when we're doing it. I think that's pretty
absolutely.
important.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. We covered so much over the course of this hour, Casey. Um, I still have questions for you, but I'm gonna choose like a couple more that's
Okay.
like on my
Yeah,
mind right now. So,
sure.
um, we still haven't really talked about dance in particular and how that has helped you heal from Crohn's. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So if I had to pick one intervention, and I've done many, energy healing, all kinds of holistic things that go beyond chiropractic and Reiki and herbs. And I mean, I've really covered a lot of different things to help me manage the Crohn's disease. But if I really was, someone said to me, you can only pick
Mm.
one thing, what would it be? I would probably forego all of that and hold on to the ballroom dancing. And here's why. I feel like you have a really sort of not good relationship with your body when it's in pain. And when your body is not behaving the way that you want it to behave, and it can be embarrassing having Crohn's because it's the bowel, it's the gut, and it can hurt a lot. I can get, really swelled and look, like almost pregnant at times, like, and I'm not pregnant. And I never have been, so it's hard for me as a person living in my body to see these things happen to me that are very uncomfortable. So you have almost, you can develop this sort of anger at your body, like, why are you doing this to me? Why can't you just give me a break? So that can be the relationship living with a disease. But when you step into specifically ballroom dance, I feel like for me, the relationship part of dancing with a partner has been really crucial. I didn't have the same experience when I was just dancing by myself, like
Mhm.
doing, modern, or, some sort of contemporary style. That was the relationship part that really changed me. And I think, one, when you're doing ballroom dancing and you're dancing with a partner, the senses that are activated, there are many of them. And when you're focused on those senses, it's music, it's movement, it's relational, it's touch. You don't have room to also have the sense of all these other things that, Crohn's disease, like, your brain can only focus on so much.
Mhm.
So it really is an opportunity to build a different relationship with my body, where I say the Crohn's doesn't exist on the dance floor.
Oh,
Like,
love that.
it's completely not there. And that is a huge, huge gift.
Oh,
Um,
that, oh my God, that just gave me goosebumps because I feel the same way with dance. It's like
yeah,
I'm not bipolar when I
no.
dance. You
Yeah,
know,
there's no
I'm
room for it.
free.
You are free of it.
I'm free.
Yep. And if we could
Yeah.
figure out how to take that power and to put it into the rest of our lives, that would be amazing. I
Mm,
That's really challenging to do. So I wish I could, but I can't quite take whatever that energy is or whatever happens to me or in me and just make it happen. Every day of my life when I'm just going through the
hmm.
mundane stuff, but it's sacred to me that
Right.
on that dance floor, in a performance, in a lesson, and even when I'm practicing it by myself, that is a place where it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I think that's because we can cultivate a different relationship with our body that is free of that, and it's just the way that we're naturally supposed to be, like when
Yeah.
we're free of these things that really sort of bind us and give us a narrative about ourselves. I'm sick, I have pain, we
Hmm.
register pain, we think about it, that kind of thing. But I also think the relationship part, especially for someone who had a lot of trauma, trusting human beings
Hmm.
is not easy for me. And when you are in a closed hold position with a male, in my case, it's scary. And then you're like, oh, touch your partner. Oh, like be comfortable touching your own
Touch.
skin. Touch yourself.
Touch.
This is like
Yeah.
this is big stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's okay. You're gonna be off balance a little bit, but you're gonna rely. So I think the trust piece, the way that that heals the brain from early childhood stuff is very, very significant. And they've shown in studies that, right brain to right brain, there's that connection, this attachment that we talk about, attachment theory.
Hmm.
It does happen in relationship with a dance partner. And as you are overcoming trust, you're becoming more vulnerable, like your guards dropping, you're becoming more yourself, and you're overcoming all these things that you've been told you're not supposed to be or who you are. It's really quite profound. So I
Wow.
could go on and on about it, but it's hugely important. And then there is an anti-inflammatory piece too. I do think movement in general,
Hmm.
especially dance, does calm inflammation. It calms the nervous system. There's a
Wow.
lot of things that go on in the physiology. So it is,
Wow. I didn't know
I
that.
think, a gift for sure.
That's remarkable. Like that is the biggest intervention, right? All the
Yeah.
reasons you named before, but like if from the physiological
Yes.
level, you're addressing the root cause of your condition through movement, through dance, like it can be even better than a pill,
Totally.
that's
Absolutely. Well, and I think about like if our gut microbiome and our little bugs in our gut, if they respond to violence in the home and they get more aggressive in our bellies and can cause more infection and things like that, just think about how those little bugs are responding to us blissfully, joyfully moving to music.
mm,
They're living things inside of us, and our whole body and all of our cells. I just imagine that they are really singing and dancing and feeling free from something that can be pretty horrible. and
yeah.
and I believe that in the sort of spiritual sense of it all. So it's really powerful, and I wish for every human to find what that is for them. If it's not dance, and it's whatever it is, stargazing, taking walks with their dog, I don't care what it is. If they can find something like that, to me that's sort of the therapeutic task, is to help people find what that is for them
Hmm.
and to bring that more into their lives.
Yeah. This sense of like well, what brings you joy, what brings you healing, what brings you into the most alignment with your essence, right?
Yeah.
Like who you are.
Yeah.
um Find that thing, right? And I think, yeah, for me dancing is one of those things, but I have a lot of different
You're very
coping
creative in
skills.
many realms. So, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
it's this
Casey.
it's this concept of self-activation. Like we
Ah.
go through our lives and we have all these things that sort of stop us from being who we are, and messages, things we've been told, things the culture tells us, things we've experienced that tell us I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not this, I'm not that, blah blah blah. I'm sick, I'm whatever it is. And that's just stuff that gets layered on us. but that's not the essence as you described it of really who we are, and finding things that sort of strip all that off of us so we kind of become closer to who we really are
Hmm.
as a person. That is the freedom that I think we all kind of strive to, like, how can I just be in my skin and be okay with being me?
Yeah.
How can I do that? How can I go in front of people and perform or put on this dress that maybe I'm insecure about? Like, all this stuff, cannot compare myself to others. How can you just be okay being inside your body and skin? That's, I think we're all working every day to try to find that
Yeah.
peace within ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, Amazing interview, and I would love to have you on another time because there's still many more questions I want to ask. But the last question is going back to therapy, the topic of therapy. Why do you think people need therapy? You know, because I personally think like everyone should see a therapist, regardless of whether they have a mental health diagnosis. Why do you think people should see therapy?
Any human who thinks that they can go through their life by themselves and survive it without some help from the outside, I think that's like truly crazy.
Yeah,
Life
that's
is just
delusional.
really, really tough.
Yeah.
And the closer that the people that are around you, that you're close in your support system, they are crucial and really important. But honestly, it's really important to have someone who doesn't already have an idea of what you are or who you are, and they can give you some objectivity. We need objectivity, and you really can't get that from, I can't get that from my husband. He is objective, but he's still, of course, he's invested in certain things. He lives with me. He's attached to the outcome
Mm-hmm.
of whatever happens to me or whatever I do or don't do.
Mm.
Same with my friends. There's history with us, or even newer friends. Maybe they don't know me quite that well. So it's really important to have a safe place to talk about anything you want. I mean, a therapist is there to listen to whatever it is that is important to you to bring up,
Yeah.
and for them to take it in and give you a perspective is so healthy. And maybe it's not a perspective you like, or maybe it's not one that you believe in, but it's really important to have that, and to also like go through life with that person that is your therapist. That's when things get hard with the other relationships in your life. You need someone who is like, I'm still here
Yeah.
and I'm going to still like go through this with you. I think it's just, I can't imagine going through life without having that. And without having someone double check me as well, like to call me out on when I'm self sabotaging, or to call me out when maybe my perspective is getting in the way of something that could be good for me. That honesty, I think that that's really an important part of therapy. And I don't know how people can go through life without having that part in their life.
Yeah.
And to think they can get it from the closest people to them only, I think that's pretty difficult because
Mm-hmm.
of not having the objectivity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So I do believe everybody should be in therapy. Therapists should be in therapy.
Yeah.
Couples should be in therapy. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
couples therapy. My husband and
Mm.
I are big advocates of couples therapy. Our marriage is so much stronger because of it.
Amazing.
I'm in therapy for my health stuff. You know, how do I deal with this? And I'm in therapy for my own personal growth. I mean, I think it's crucial, and I'd like to see people be able to comfortably access it and not be afraid to, for
Yeah.
whatever reasons,
Yeah. Minus the
to
stigma
avoid it.
and all that stuff. Yeah.
Because the stigma is just nonsense. We stigmatize anything that we can't see or that we don't understand.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's just unfortunately the way that humans sort of like putting things into these boxes of labels and categories. And mental health is one of those that, you know, if they don't understand it and they can't see it, then okay, let's make this big stigma around it. It's perfectly normal to go to therapy because you're studying for an exam that you're stressed about passing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it doesn't have to be big stuff. It can be day-to-day stuff too. And it
Yeah.
can be the big stuff also. And frankly, anybody who says they don't have the big stuff is probably not being honest with themselves, because we
Yeah.
all have big stuff.
We do. We all have our challenges and our I call them shame stories. Bipolar was my shame story where I was so ashamed of it. I could never have imagined starting a podcast where I talked openly about it. But um, yeah, we all have things about ourselves that we want to change and things that cause us suffering. And ultimately, I think therapists are tasked with the job of reducing suffering,
Yep.
right? They're healers. And yeah, thank
And
you,
we all
Casey.
have
This.
loss. Loss is
Mm,
a part of all of our lives. Every human goes through loss of some sort, not just people and jobs, but loss of their their youth. I mean,
mm,
loss is everywhere, and that's a really important thing to also go to a therapist for, to help grieve and let go and rebound and have that place to do that. And there's really not many spaces that are for that purpose, in my
right,
opinion.
right. So the name of this podcast is The Well Anchored Life. And to me, what it sounds like is therapy is an anchor.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one consistent, constant relationship you have. You have your therapist who has your back, even when you have a breakup with someone, even when, old friends leave your life, the
Yeah.
therapist is the anchor, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's
So,
sort of the reminder of your anchor to yourself.
mm,
When you become untethered to yourself, the therapist's job is also to remind you that you are your own anchor, and how do you anchor yourself. So
mm,
that's also a really important piece of having a well anchored
well anchored life.
life.
Last question for you, Casey, is how do you drop your anchor? What's your anchor?
So what's my anchor, and how do I
How do you
let
like drop your anchor amidst life storms?
yeah, it's a good question.
Hmm.
I try to remember and to feel that I'm here in my body with my body. So I know grounding seems a little bit like sort of cliche, but like sometimes I feel like I lose my anchor because I'm sort of floating around in like a bubble of stress, and I sort of literally lose that I'm here, like
Mm,
right here, right now. So something that, sometimes I just like hug myself. They call it like a warm hug, and I do these like
mm,
little funny, like little tapping things that bring me back into a sense of, okay, I'm here. I'm in my body. I can feel myself. I'm here, right now. I'm alive. I'm okay. I'm right here, alive and well. It's okay. Like in this moment, like things that I can do that bring me back to not the past, not the future, but like right here, right now. That's a huge part of anchoring myself,
yeah,
because it's really hard to be in the moment right here, right now.
yeah. Love that. Love that. Well, Casey, this was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your story. And I am so inspired by you. And I have taken a little break hiatus from dancing just because I'm a little broke right now. I'm starting a company, so all of my money is going to that. So I can't afford dance
Yeah.
lessons. But once I get back in the studio, I hope to see you. And um, you're doing great in dance, by the way. You just sent me a video of your recent performance. I was like, oh my God, you improved so much since the last time I saw you. So
Thank you.
keep working at it. Keep going. Keep dancing.
And maybe you're done with like right now structured dancing, but I see you're still dancing all the time. Like
Yes.
you do your own, you teach, you're dancing, you're moving, and
Hmm.
you're creatively doing things with your movement all the time. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that still counts
It still
significantly.
counts. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Casey. Have a good night. I'll talk to
You
you
too.
soon.
Okay.
All
Bye.
right. Bye. As we wrap up today's journey, a massive thank you for spending this time with us on the Well Anchored Life. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps other people find the show. We have new episodes dropping every Tuesday, so follow us on Instagram to stay up to date with new episodes and behind the scenes content. We appreciate you being here. Talk to you guys next week.